Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the chapter, The Order of the Worlds, which is so fascinating. And we're on page 814. Ranga, take the lead.
So, Srendra is examining the 7 worlds: matter, life, mind, supermind, Satchidananda. These are the 7 planes of consciousness, and he is looking at their character and discussing what are the possibilities, from where they have come, what is their nature, and all. Okay? So, I read the summary of what we read last time. He has discussed matter already. Now he is discussing the larger life plane. The larger life plane holds in itself both luminous and dark elements which are given free and full play of satisfaction, which they cannot get here on earth because of the mixed nature of the earth life. So this we have to understand. The life world of prana exists by itself, pure. There is no mixture as there is in the physical world. In the physical world, we have a mixture of material substance, life substance, and mental substance. But there in the life world, it is independent, it stands by itself, and it has a fixed nature. So that's what he's saying. Okay? And it is more luminous. There are luminous parts and there are dark parts also in it, and they have the full right of self-satisfaction. Any influence or any force there has the possibility of expressing and satisfying itself fully. In this physical world, it's not like that, because there are things that help, but there are also things that obstruct your desire. So you can't satisfy it all the time.
Why do they have dark parts?
Why there are dark parts? Why?
Why do they have dark parts?
Yes, they have, because the life plane is where all sorts of creatures are there. The Rakshasic.
Yes.
Rakshasa, Pisacha, and Asuras. They are all there in the life plane. But there are also good influences. We note the interesting incident in the press where there was a Heidelberg gnome who was protecting the machine.
Yes.
So we have all these, that's what is mixed nature. So in this vital world, the vital principle has full scope of satisfaction without hindrance or opposition, because there is no mixture. Okay, so whether it be what we would consider a malevolent force or a beneficial force, both have the power to satisfy themselves fully. But we say malevolent, but there it is not malevolent. It is just nature is like that. It has to satisfy itself. Suppose there is hunger, it wants to satisfy itself. Suppose there is a desire, it can satisfy itself. Okay, so in the vital world, the vital principle has full scope of satisfaction without hindrance or opposition. These elements, which seem extreme, perverse, abnormal, express themselves there fully according to their typal character. What is Rakshasic to us is there a natural feature of that plane of existence. We see their reason for existence, and we comprehend how and why man loves his imperfections and limitations, why he attaches himself to his perversions, and his life drama of virtue and sin, of laughter and tears, his success and failures. Man has to learn to see these things in themselves without his moral ideas of good and evil, which undergo change from plane to plane. Okay, so I hope it is clear. Man's ideas of hell and heaven, however imaginatively distorted, do come from there, and they throw their influences on man in earthly life. So, this is what he said in the previous para. So, what to us seems to be a wrong force, an asuric force, there it's not asuric, it's of the nature of ego. It has just satisfied itself. Here in the physical world, we have to go to a higher level, so we remove those things which we consider morally wrong. Okay? But there, it's not like that. So, now we come to the next para. In the same way as the powers of life are self-founded, perfect and full in a greater life beyond us, so too the powers of mind, its ideas and principles that influence our earth being, are found to have in the greater mind world, their own field of fullness of self-nature, while here in human existence they throw out only partial formations which have much difficulty in establishing themselves because of their meeting and mixture with other powers and principles. Other powers and principles, there a thought is very, very pure. It can express itself fully in that world. But when it comes down here, there are opposing forces. There is matter which is very dense, and there is vital which is also not going to allow things to happen according to what it wants to express. So it's like me, if I'm at home, I can speak whatever my opinion is, I can speak without any hindrance. But suppose I come into a room where there are 10 people with opposite opinions, I will not be able to express. They will obstruct me at every time. No, that is wrong, this is wrong. And what are those powers that obstruct mind plane of consciousness? Physical and vital. They don't allow the full expression, pure expression of the mind.
Not mental. Not the mental.
The mental itself is that which wants to express itself. But the mental is being obstructed by physical.
Right.
And
right.
We see that even in ourselves. I have a thought and I want to express it. It's quite clear in my own mind. But when I'm fumbling for words, my brain won't allow me. My brain is the physical. Then my vital also will obstruct and say, hey, this is not right. So this is what Swami is saying. Greater mind world and their own field of fullness of self-nature. While here in human existence, they throw out only partial formations, which here in they throw out only partial formations, which have much difficulty in establishing themselves because of their meeting and mixture with other powers and principles. Other powers and principles, physical and vital. This meeting, this mixture, curbs their completeness, alloys their purity, disputes and defeats their influence. Three things he has told us. First, it curbs their completeness, make it incomplete. Alloys their purity. The idea which is there pure, here it becomes a little different. Disputes and defeats their influence. Does not allow that to become expressed in the world. These other worlds then are not evolutionary, but typal. Typal means of a fixed nature. There is no evolution there is no movement. We must also remember that in the physical world, there is movement, there is action. But the moment you go into the higher worlds, there is no action there. The silent mind, they are absolutely immutable. So when there is immutability, how can there be evolution? No change at all. That's what Swami is pointing out. Okay? So, these other worlds then are not evolutionary, but typal. It is one, though not the sole reason for their existence, that they provide things that must arise in the involutionary manifestation, as well as things thrown up in the evolution with a field of satisfaction of their own significance, where they can exist in their own right. In that world, they can exist in their own right. This established condition is a base from which their functions and workings can be cast as elements into the complex process of evolutionary nature. I'll read the summary, it will be very clear. I'll put it in very simple words. Similarly, the larger mind plane. So he has told us that the life plane is independent of the physical world, but when it tries to express itself here, it can't do it. It is obstructed by matter. Similarly, the larger mind plane has its own principle of thought, which gets full play and satisfaction in its own native plane, but which it cannot get on earth because of opposition from other mixed forces. These higher worlds have each their own typical principles and are non-evolving. They are static worlds, typal. They are planes of existence which are like rungs of the evolutionary ladder which have to be entered into by ascending beings. So we have to go into those planes, and there those who are living in the higher planes of consciousness, take Sri Aurobindo's case. His mind is not limited to the brain. His mind has gone up, and there's clarity, and he can express himself fully there, properly. So that is why those who are very wise, their sayings are usually very clear and very coherent. Okay, that's what is being mentioned. Now we go to the next para. If we look from this point of view at man's traditional accounts of otherworldly existence, we shall find that mostly they point to worlds of a larger life liberated from the restrictions and imperfections or incompletenesses of life in earth nature. These accounts are evidently built largely by imagination, but there is an element also of intuition and divination. Now, what is divination? Divination is to find a better explanation than what was there previously. In other words, you are feeling your way through, somewhat like a little bit of guesswork. Okay.
He uses the word divines in Savitri.
Yeah, there is a big difference between divination and divinization.
Yes.
Divinization means to make divine, but divination means to search for knowledge at a higher level. Okay. So intuition and divination, a feeling of what life can be and surely is in some domain of its manifested or its realizable nature. There is also an element of true subliminal contact and experience. Not only imagination but also real experience. But the mind of man translates what he sees or receives or contacts from other nature into figures proper to its own consciousness. They are his translations of supraphysical realities into which his own significant forms and images, and through these forms and images, he enters into communication with the realities and can make them to a certain degree present and effective. The experience of an after-death continuance of a modified earth life may be explained as due to this kind of translation, but it is also explainable partly as a creation of a subjective post-mortal state, after death, post-mortal state, in which he still lives in figures of habitual experience before he enters into otherworldly realities, partly as a passage through life worlds where the type of things expresses itself in formations originative of those to which he was attached in his earthly body or akin to them, and therefore exercises a natural attraction on the vital being after its exit from the body. But apart from these subtler life states, the traditional accounts of otherworldly existence contain, though as a rarer, more elevated element, not included in the popular notion of these things, a higher grade of states of existence which are clearly of a mental and not a vital character, and others founded on some spiritual mental principle. These higher principles are formulated in states of being into which our inner experience can rise or the soul enter. The principle of gradation we have accepted is therefore justified, provided we recognize that it is one way of organizing our experience and that other ways proceeding from other viewpoints are possible. We'll discuss it. For a classification can always be valid from the principle and viewpoint adopted by it, while from other principles and viewpoints, another classification of the same things can be equally valid. But for our purpose, the system we have chosen is of the greatest value because it is fundamental and answers to the truth of the manifestation, which is of the utmost practical importance. It helps us to understand our own constituted existence and the course of the involution and the evolutionary motion of nature. At the same time, we see that the other worlds are not things quite apart from the material universe and earth nature, but penetrate and envelop it with their influences and have on it a secret incidence of formative and directive force which is not easily calculable. This organization of our otherworldly knowledge and experience supplies us with a clue to the nature and lines of action of this incidence. Language is a little difficult, but if you see the summary, it will be quite clear and we will discuss the summary also. This is a summary. Man's traditional tales of these subtler planes are always based on his own terrestrial experiences, but shorn, removed from, of their imperfect and incomplete features. So man, when he goes into these planes, when he comes back, he doesn't have the language of that one. So he has to use the language of his own world here. So imagination comes in and tries to give parallel expressions from the other worlds. So imagination. What exists imperfect here on earth becomes perfect in these worlds. Naturally, his imagination is largely responsible for these myths. But there is intuition and some hope of what earthly conditions can become more true and complete. So, what is being said is that when man with his consciousness goes to the other worlds, he finds their conditions which are here imperfect, but there perfect. So, you have the word archetype, which means the essence of a lotus here is in those worlds it is perfect. So it's the everything here in the physical world is of a mixed nature. But if you take it to the higher world, you will see that its perfect form is there. That's what he's saying. Okay? There is a little bit of imagination, but there is also intuition, he's saying, and he's using the words intuition and some hope of what earthly conditions can become. So when you go there, you see that, oh, this imperfection can become perfect there. It's perfectly all right. That is the reason why the Advaitins say that here imperfection is permanent. Let's go there. That is a perfect thing. But Srenda has introduced the idea of evolution and he's saying even that perfection is possible here in the physical world. Okay? So, but man's translations of these subtler events are always based on his own earthly experiences. Supraphysical realities become symbols and events according to human consciousness. His contact with these worlds become effective. A typical example of this translation is after death survival of a being. Okay? Now this is an interesting thing. That's what we'll discuss. The world conditions continue to exist in some form or other. Okay? So, whatever you are experiencing here, you go there, everything is new, but you try to understand that newness by your experiences here. Sometimes a departed soul is not even aware of his existence in the subtle world, but seems to continue his earthly life. Example, ghost phenomena. Okay. But apart from vital worlds, there are also mind levels and spiritual planes to which the human soul can ascend. We must note that our classification of the graded planes is one possibility. Other classified in systems can also be equally valid. We are saying that they are arranged in this way, and we are seeing it in this way. But others can see it in different ways.
But he does say that ours
Is the best.
is the best.
He is not saying best, but he is saying
No,
it is
he
very-
doesn't use that word.
Yeah, it's useful for us.
Yes.
Okay. Other can be said. These worlds are not separated from the earth plane. They dovetail, interpenetrate, and have some effects on earth. So, on the one hand, he is saying that these are pure worlds. On the other hand, he is saying that there is an interpenetration. So, if you look at the one plane, the lower is influencing the lower part of this one. The higher is influencing the higher part of this one. In the middle, there is some amount of purity. And also it is influencing the physical world. That's what he said in this para. Okay, so now we go to the next para. The existence and influence of other worlds are a fact of primary importance for the possibilities and for the scope of our evolution in terrestrial nature. So what's he saying? He's saying the influence of these higher worlds is very necessary. Their influence comes and tells us that this is possible. So for evolution, the pressure from the higher worlds is very necessary. Okay. For if the physical universe were the only field of manifestation of the infinite reality, and at the same time the field of its whole manifestation, we should have to suppose that since all the principles of its being from matter to spirit are entirely involved in the apparently inconscient force, which is the basis of the first working of this universe, they are being evolved by it here completely and here solely without any other aid or pressure except that of the secret superconscience within it. So he's saying it's possible to imagine, it could have been, that matter is the only world and the other planes of consciousness that are there are all involved here. And the evolution is only by the involvement. But he's saying it's not exactly like that. There is a pressure from the other worlds also. Two possibilities. This is also a possibility, he is saying. Okay? Only the physical world is real. The others are all involved, they don't exist. They are all involved here. And the evolution is slow. But he will tell us later on that it's not like that. These worlds do exist independently. It's not only the physical world that exists, but there are also subtle worlds.
And they have their
Influence.
Yes.
They do influence us.
Yes.
So, if it was so, if it was only the physical world and all the higher powers are involved in it, there would then be a system of things in which the principle of matter must always remain the first principle, essential and original, determining condition of manifested existence. Spirit might indeed, in the end, arrive to a limited extent at its natural domination. It might make its basis of physical matter a more elastic instrument, not altogether prohibitive of its action, of its own highest law and nature, or opposed to that nature action, as it now is in its inelastic resistance. So what he is saying is that if the physical world were the only world and the other higher worlds did not exist but were involved here, then maybe spirit will be able to manifest itself here, okay, without much interference by the material world, the density of matter. That's possible. But spirit would always be dependent upon matter. However much it wants to, spirit will always remain dependent on matter. That is exactly the Mayavada theory. The Mayavada theory is exactly that. The divine here will never be able to manifest itself fully. If you want the divine, you have to go there. As soon as it comes down here, it will become imperfect. It is there, but it is not there in its purity. Spirit can never exist purely here. Okay, so spirit would always be dependent upon matter for its field and manifestation. It could have no other field because there isn't any, only matter. It could not get outside it to another kind of manifestation. And within it also, it could not very well liberate any other principle of its being into sovereignty over the material foundation. Others are all there, but they will never be able to become fully independent. Matter would remain the one persistent determinant of its manifestation. Life could not become dominant and determinative. Mind could not become the master and creator. Their boundaries of capacity would be fixed by the capacities of matter, which they might enlarge or modify, but would not be able to transform radically or liberate. This is a materialistic theory that the physical world is the only world, and it is exactly as it is. There is nothing you can do about it. But there would be no place for any free and full manifestation of any power of the being. All would be limited forever by the conditions of an obscuring material formation. Spirit, mind, life would have no native field or complete scope of their own characteristic power and principle. None of them would be able to exist purely in the physical world. Okay? It is not easy to believe in the inevitability of the self-limitation of spirit. It is not easy to believe in the inevitability of this self-limitation if spirit is the creator and these principles have an independent existence and are not products, results or phenomena of the energy of matter. So he has told us this theory, and then he's saying, but we have started with the presumption, we have started with the theory that spirit is the creator of all things. So how can it become subservient to matter? It cannot. So this theory we have to discard, that matter is the determinant. I read the summary and go to the next page. Para. These other worlds, by their existence and influence, have a very important function for evolution on Earth. By their pressure on the Earth atmosphere, they help effectuate the evolution. If we suppose that they did not exist, okay, the material field would be the only manifestation of spirit. Then we would have to suppose that all the other powers and principles, life, mind, spirit, are already involved in matter, and then the primacy of matter would again be established. Primacy of matter, the most important. Evolution would then depend solely on matter as starting point. It could perhaps be possible for spirit to work out some of its powers here on earth and perhaps make matter less rigid and inflexible as it is not at present. But the utmost importance of matter and the spirit's inability to exercise its omnipotence on earth would be firmly established. Life, mind and spirit would always remain derivative and secondary powers here on earth. The Mayavada theory. The full manifestation of spirit on earth would be impossible. That's what they say. But since we have insisted, now Srimada's own view, but since we have insisted that the Supreme Spirit alone has a creative power, it is not possible to accept the supremacy of matter over spirit. Spirit is the creator of matter and not its result. He has discussed the theory and discarding. You may wonder sometimes, why is he discussing all these things? Why doesn't he say exactly what his view is, and we would accept it? But you must remember that many others may not accept. So simply discussing the possibilities, rejecting. So he is answering those who would not agree with him, probably.
And he's sharing this with the world.
Yes, that's right. He is not taking a shortcut and saying only this is my view. He is anticipating the objections and discarding them with reasoning. That's what he's doing. Okay. Now we go to the next para. But Given the fact that the infinite reality is free in the play of its consciousness, it is not bound to involve itself in the nations of matter before it can at all manifest. So, spirit is free. It need not tie itself down permanently into matter. It's not possible, not necessary. It can remain free. It can involve itself but also remain free. Okay? So, it is possible for it to create just the contrary order of things, a world in which the unity of spiritual being is the matrix and the first condition of any formation or action. The energy at work is a self-aware spiritual existence in movement, and all its names and forms are a self-conscious play of the spiritual unity. Or it might be an order in which the spirit's innate power of conscious force or will would realize freely and directly its own possibilities in itself, and not as here through the restricting medium of life force in matter. Okay. That realization would be at once the first principle of the manifestation and the object of all its free and blissful action. It might be an order, again, he is considering various possibilities. It might be an order again in which the free play of an infinite mutual self-delight in a multiplicity of beings, conscious not only of their concealed or underlying eternal unity, but of their present joy of oneness, would be the object. In such a system, the action of the principle of self-existent bliss would be the first principle and the universal condition. So he is saying that if Ananda had the power to do, he is discussing that would be the main thing. Okay, so again it might be a world order, another possibility, in which the supermind would be the dominant principle from the beginning. The nature of the manifestation would then be a multiplicity of beings finding through the free and luminous play of their divine individuality all the manifold joy of their difference in oneness. So, I'll read the summary, then it will be clear what it is, considering many possibilities. The supreme reality, being absolute freedom, would not be bound to involve itself in the nations of matter in order to evolve upwards. Okay. It is free. It need not tie itself down here. It could, on the contrary, do the reverse. Okay. It can make Ananda the primary fundamental basis of manifestation on earth, ignoring, so to speak, the obstruction of matter. The divine could have made Ananda the primal foundation of everything, and from there it could have been done. But the divine has decided somehow to make matter the foundation of things.
Where would be the joy?
Yes. So that he is discussing the various possibilities. If it were so, it would then create conditions on earth in Satchidananda, and Satchidananda would reveal, bring forth divine beings on earth who live simultaneously with the untransformed beings. So, matter would be there, but Ananda would be the main principle. So, Ananda would easily create a new race where Ananda would be the principle, not matter. Okay? The obsession. It would then create conditions on earth, Satchidananda would reveal, bring forth divine beings on earth who live simultaneously with the untransformed beings as they have evolved up to this point in evolution. We would then have a supramental race of divine beings characterized by divine qualities. They would be conscious of their fundamental unity with all and would live and express truth, consciousness and bliss. So he's saying there are so many possibilities. So we are going to choose this possibility. That's the whole idea. Nor need the series stop here. For we observe that with us mind is hampered by life in matter and finds all the difficulty possible in dominating the resistance of these two different powers, and that life itself is similarly restricted by the mortality, the inertia, and the instability of matter. But evidently, there can be a world order in which neither of these two disabilities forms part of the first conditions of existence. There is the possibility of a world in which mind would be the first dominant, free to work upon its own substance and matter, or matter, as a quite plastic material, or where matter would be quite evidently the result of the universal mind force working itself out in life. It is that even here in reality, but here the mind force is involved from the beginning for a long time, subconscious, and even when it has emerged, never in free possession of itself, but subject to its encasing material. While there it would be in possession of itself and master of its material, which would be much more subtle and elastic than in a predominantly physical universe. So this sentence here reminds me of what Mother said about Purani. She said that Purani is in this supramental world, which we all know, and is playing with supramental substance. And there he can make whatever he wants out of that substance. But he can't do that here, because the pressure and the dominance of matter is there. So too, life might have its own world order where it will be sovereign. In the life world, it is sovereign, able to deploy its own elastic and freely variable desires and tendencies, not menaced at every moment by disintegrating forces, and therefore occupied chiefly with the care of self-preservation and restricted in its play by the state of precarious tension, which limits its instincts of free formation, free self-gratification, and free adventure. So what Shraddha is saying is, he has said that already before, that in the life world, everything that is there has got the capacity of self-preservation. It need not be destroyed. In the physical world, the animal cannot preserve itself. It is subject to death. And death is a characteristic of the disintegrating power of matter. Okay. But there, matter is not there, so it need not disintegrate itself. Self-preservation. So it leads us to the beings in the life world are immortal. There is no disintegration. They are permanent, they are immortal. That's what is being said.
But they're not typal.
They are typal.
They are typal.
They are typal in the physical world.
In the
in the higher worlds.
In the higher world.
Yeah, they are typal. They don't change. But that is why they can preserve themselves, and they can also satisfy themselves. Okay, so self-preservation and restricted in its play by the precarious tension which limits its instincts. The instinct of life is free formation. I can do whatever I want. Free self-gratification and free adventure. Okay, these are the three. Now, free formation is very interesting because we know that beings in the higher worlds can take any form they want. They can change their form. The gods can change their form. Even the vital forces here can change their form. To a certain extent, that power is here in the physical world in a very limited manner. A chameleon can change its color. Okay, so it is possible to free formation. An octopus can change its color and its form. Not all can do that, but it is possible. But there, this power is absolute. Any being living in the world, life world, can change their form. Mental world is even more. Free forms. Free formation. These three powers are there in the life world. Free formation, self-gratification. You remember he has told us that everything can be fully satisfied. Every desire can be fully satisfied. That's what I mean by self-gratification. Free. And free adventure. It can do whatever it wants. Okay. The separate dominance of each principle of being is an eternal possibility in the manifestation of being, given always that they are principles distinct in their dynamic power and mode of working, even though one in original substance. So, I'll read the summary and then we can stop here today. The spiritual evolution need not stop at this point. We see that mind force is subject to inferior life force, which is itself hampered by inert matter, subject to death and impermanence. The spirit could create here conditions in which mind would be able to wield its original native powers and manipulate even dumb matter. Mind would have the power to manipulate dumb matter. Right now it's the opposite. Dumb matter has got the power to restrict the mind. Okay, so it could make life force free from its stifling hold on matter and let it satisfy itself fully in its true vital movements. Each divine power would be clearly separate, yet essentially one and the same. Spirit, mind, life, matter are the gradations of one and the same reality. There what he is saying. That could make no difference if all this were only a philosophical possibility. He has been discussing the possibilities. So now he is saying that could make no difference if all this were only a philosophical possibility or a potentiality in the being of Satchidananda, which it never realizes or has not yet realized, or if realized, has not brought within the scope of the consciousness of beings living in the physical universe. But all our spiritual and psychic experience bears affirmative witness, brings us always a constant and in its main principles an invariable evidence of the existence of higher worlds, freer planes of existence, not having bound ourselves down, like so much of modern thought, to the dogma that only physical experience not physical, based upon the physical sense is true, the analysis of physical experience by the reason alone verifiable, and all else only result of physical experience and physical existence, and anything beyond this an error, self-delusion and hallucination, we are free to accept this evidence and to admit the reality of these planes. So, very complicated sentence, but Swami is saying that materialists are saying that this is the only world. I don't believe in that. That's what he's saying. So we are free to believe that these experiences, subtle planes of consciousness are real. We can believe that. We are free to accept this evidence and to admit the reality of these planes. We see that they are practically different harmonies from the harmony of the physical universe. They occupy, as the word plane suggests, a different level in the scale of being and adopt a different system and ordering of its principles. We need not inquire for our present purpose whether they coincide in time and space with our own world or move in a different field of space and in another stream of time. In either case, it is in a more subtle substance and with other movements. All that directly concerns us is to know whether they are different universes, each complete in itself and in no way meeting, intercrossing or affecting the others, or are rather different scales of one graded and interwoven system of being, parts therefore of one complex universal system. The fact that they can enter into the field of our mental consciousness would naturally suggest the validity of the second alternative. We'll discuss this next time, because I'm just reading it now. But what we find is that these higher planes are actually at every moment acting upon and in communication with our own plane of being, although this action is naturally not present to our ordinary waking or outer consciousness, because that is for the most part limited to a reception and utilization of the contacts of the physical world. But the moment we either go back into our subliminal being or enlarge our waking consciousness beyond the scope of the physical context, we become aware of something of this higher action. We find even that the human being can project himself partially into these higher planes and under certain conditions, even while in the body. A fortiare, this is a Latin phrase, but in English it is pronounced in a very interesting way. Fortiori is fortiori. But he must be able to do it when out of the body, and to do it then completely, since there is no longer the disabling condition of the physical life bound down to the body. We'll discuss this in great detail next time. Very interesting, and Shyamda has been doing. I'll give examples. The consequences of this relation and this power of transference are of immense importance. On the one side, they immediately justify, at any rate as an actual possibility, the ancient tradition of at least a temporary sojourn of the human conscious being in other worlds than the physical after the dissolution of the physical body. A man can exist without a body in these worlds. On the other side, they open to us the possibility of an action of the higher planes on the material existence, which can liberate the powers they represent, powers of life, mind and spirit, for the evolutionary intention inherent within nature by the very fact of their embodiment in matter.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all. And we will see you again on Monday at the same time on page 820, but there will be a summary of the previous paragraph by Ranga first.